Wednesday, it is September 15th, 2021. I'm Travis Justice, and this is another edition of MCL Construction's Client Conversations. Over the next half hour, we're going to be having a client conversation, but somewhat different today because, in the past, we've always had clients of MCL Construction. And today is not the case. We're actually going to go to somebody we were a client of. And if you've watched these client conversations over the last several months, you may notice they tend to turn into, leadership talks, because I like to talk leadership. I think everybody's fascinated by leadership and personal growth and company growth. But before we get started, a couple things to keep in mind as we move along through the afternoon, and even as you get done watching this, you can follow social media or MCL Construction on social media. You can find us on LinkedIn. Of course, you're watching live on LinkedIn right now. Facebook, where you're also watching live. Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and I always encourage you to visit our webpage at mclconstruction.com. Now, you might be thinking, what about MCL Construction? Well, we were founded in 1987. We are located in Omaha, Nebraska. We also have an office in Kearney, Nebraska. Right now, we have roughly 171 employees. That fluctuates depending on the time of year, up to as many as 220 at some times. But right now, we're right around that 171 mark. We do want you to know that for many businesses, we understand that navigating that entire construction process and knowing who to trust can be overwhelming. And here at MCL Construction, our people, well, we simplify that process by listening, planning, executing, and continuing the relationship to build your vision. So what about today? We are going to talk leadership, and I don't think there's anybody better in the eastern Nebraska, western Iowa area to talk leadership with than Boyd Ober. He started Leadership Resources in 2002 and has received prestigious Freedom Forum and top EOS implementers. EOS is a system used by a lot of people, and Boyd is an expert at EOS. He is the recipient of LMI's World Motivator of the Year Award, the American Marketing Association's Marketer of the Year, LMI Franchise of the Year, and the LMI Growth Award. Oh, and by the way, he's also taken the time to write a book, Releasing the Power of Your Leadership Presence. And Boyd joins us right now. And Boyd, first of all, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, my man. How are you?
It could be better. You're still on cloud nine because if I understand correctly, your daughter just got married, and you've been a busy guy. What's that like to walk somebody down the aisle?
Greatest privilege of my life. Absolutely. It was a surreal moment. You spend your whole life, you and your wife in this case. My wife is unbelievable in terms of how she's just led our family over the years, right? But the ability to stand behind the church and wait for those doors to part and to see a full church, which is awesome, but to walk your daughter down the aisle to, the man of her dreams and somebody that they're deeply in love with, obviously. But it was just, what a great privilege, man. I cannot describe it. It's the only advice I can give to young fathers. Don't screw it up, because that is the best feeling I've ever had in my life, is to be able to walk her down the aisle.
I've screwed a lot of things up, and I happen to have 3 daughters. So I know. Here's the deal. I sent my daughters to private school. I'm broke now. They're going to get married. I'm going to be broke then. I'm never going to have any money ever.
Yeah, but it's going to a good cause. It's going to their daughters. They're either going to have it now or later. So it's really not that big a deal, Travis. Enjoy it.
You're right. You know what? You can't take it with you either, right? As long as they're happy, that's all that really matters. Usually on this conversation, I mentioned it earlier that we talk to clients of MCL Construction, and right. I changed it up this month because we are a client of yours. MCL Construction and the leadership team just recently went through the Leadership Resources course. It was fabulous. I think we were in there 18 months. We had a couple hiccups because of COVID. We just got bombarded by the pandemic right when we were getting started. I'm going to ask, how were we as a client to you?
Well, first of all, thank you. Extremely kind words, but I don't normally get the privilege of working with our clients directly on these development programs. And, as luck had it with the pandemic and everything, I was able to step into your group. And it was just an honor and a privilege to work with that executive team. What I saw is pretty normal, Travis, from the standpoint of, people come into a leadership development program and say, why me? What did I do wrong? Those type of things. In this case, maybe not as much for that because the executives were making the decision. But in the same sense, it's still, why me? I'm already in a leadership position. What am I going to gain? What am I going to do? But what I really saw with this team at MCL, you talked about a little bit about your values earlier and what you drive towards, the listing and those things. You guys practice that internally as well. You really listened to each other. You grew together. And I think as an executive team, you became much stronger and much more dependent in a positive way on each other. You started trusting each other at a much higher level to say, oh, I know Travis has got this. I know Bob's got this, and it was a cool experience to watch you guys really blossom together.
Leadership is a very Googled topic. I mean, everybody goes to leadership seminars, reads leadership books. If you have comments, by the way, or questions for Boyd, just go in the comments section of LinkedIn, Facebook. You can leave them right there. And if you have questions, I can go ahead and ask Boyd those questions. But it's interesting because we were a 34-year-old company. We're not young, but we're not old either, right? But a lot of people may be wondering, as they go down this path, when is the right time to get leadership training? When is the right time to get leadership coaching? Is it, right when I'm that young entrepreneur who's getting started? Is a guy who's, just starting to scale that business at 5 to 7 years in? Or is it somebody like us that's 34 years in? Is there ever a right time to bring in a leadership coach and leadership training?
Yeah, it's a great question. We get that often because a lot of times we want to assign leadership training to someone else. They're the ones that need it, right? And I look at it a little bit like, the Arbor Day talks about in terms of when's the right time to plant a tree. Well, sure, it was 20 years ago, right? But the second best time is today. And I will say that leadership training is a continuous journey. It's like life. The moment you shut off that spigot of developing yourself, I'm not just talking about training from a standpoint I get new knowledge. I'm talking about applying it. How do you take the information you get from all different aspects in this world and apply it? That's leadership training. It can be formal, it can be informal, but the day you shut that off is the day you should just fold up your tents because you're really done. This world moves so fast and furious. We talked about your kids before we got on the air here today in terms of what they're learning in college. That's a form of leadership training. And then there's formal training like what we provide at you all. I think there's great times in your career. There's different seasons of your career, and you should be doing formal leadership development at every given time in your career. The intensity of it can change depending on the season. But when someone first gets out, I think their season is all about how do I learn as much as I can about the industry, the business I'm in. That's a formal leadership program. As they get into leadership from a standpoint of starting to direct other people, how do you give them the tools, not tricks, because there's really no tricks in leadership development, but how do you give them the tools and the practice behavior to lead others in a more positive way to influence behavior? And then as you go into senior leadership, how do you really lead that organization? And there's all kinds of seasons about that.
So I got a question for you because after I've gone through leadership resources and even some self-reflection, I'm going to be vulnerable here, right? People know me as a guy that kind of spills his guts about everything anyway. But as I've got through everything, and I think I realized maybe the most important part, and it's not, and you tell me if I'm wrong or right, is that you can have the training, you can have the coaching, but once all that ends or once you move forward, how important it is to have a mentor, somebody who's just right ahead of you that knows a little bit more. It's funny because I had great mentors up through most of my career. And I still have good friendships, but I don't think I have a mentor anymore. And maybe that's where I feel like I've just come to a complete halt, right? Maybe from that personal growth area. How important are mentors when it comes to leadership?
Oh, I think it's like everything else in life. I think the more you surround yourself with top-notch people that really challenge you to go to the next level. And I will say, Travis, I used to think about a mentor being that mentor that would be that wise sage, right? That person that's been there, done that before, and can open my eyes up to things that I haven't experienced yet. And then a few years ago, I had this intern from University of Nebraska, intern, a young man by the name of Justin Wiley, and Justin's a rock star in my world. But my youngest son actually played soccer with him, but I hired Justin as an intern, and we were talking about mentorship, and we were going through this different process, and I was getting ready to do a talk for high school valedictorians. And I said, Justin, what should I speak about? What should I talk about? And he said, well, let's talk about mentorship. And I said, okay, tell me more about that. And he gave me this term. He called it upside down mentorship. And he said, at any given time in your life, you should have somebody that's been there, done that. So mentoring up, you're the mentors coming in as a wide stage. Sideways, those people that are there at the same time you are, from the standpoint of going through the different experiences you're going through. I'm on a CEO peer board. We're going through the life experience at the same time. So sideways. And then down, from the standpoint of somebody that, in Justin's case, he hadn't experienced as much as I had in business, but he started developing me on things that I hadn't seen before from a different generation standpoint. So that upside down mentorship, and I'll give Justin all the credit in the world. It opened my eyes up to, you should have mentors in your life at all different stages, and they might fluctuate through your life.
I'm always curious what people think about leadership. And we were talking about leadership, and I asked you to say, hey, give me some of your thoughts on leadership. And let's go through these one by one. You say curiosity. What does curiosity have to do with leadership?
They always say curiosity killed the cat. I look at curiosity as one of the number one strengths of a leader. If you're not curious about what's going on in this world, if you're not curious about what's new in the world, what's going on. And I don't say you have to get deep into it, but what's going on in politics can shape your world. If you're not curious about what's going on with your kids, if you're not curious about what's going on with your spouse, just having that mindset of, I always want to learn more. I always want to be curious about what caused this to happen, or what's the underlying methodology of those type of things. When you and I talked about leadership, and you're starting to apply different behaviors, I'm curious about how it's working, how that new behavior is working. Why? Because that helps us sharpen the saw again. If I find out you're doing something differently and it's really helping you, it can help me coach you better on the side, type of thing. So always be curious.
How about authenticity? I hope you think I'm an authentic guy. I try to be as authentic as they come, but this authenticity piece when it comes to leadership.
Yeah, I think authenticity, you start looking at what does that word really mean? And a lot of times people talk about honesty and integrity. And I think that's a rite of passage. If you don't have honesty and integrity, you really shouldn't be in the conversation. But authenticity is, how do you be true to yourself? Are you showing up as your true self? And you and I have had these conversations over time, and I do think you're a very authentic person. It's not humble will come into it, but from that standpoint, I want to be authentic with myself. Am I really good at this? Okay, go ahead and tell yourself, I am really good at this, and I'm going to keep getting better at it, right? That strength type of thing. But this is something I'm struggling with right now. I want to be authentic with myself in terms of, how is that impacting my relationships? How is that impacting my ability to get done what I said I'm going to get done, so I can seek help as well along the way?
Does that authenticity also fall into personality types? So I've taken the Enneagram, I've taken the PI, I've taken the Gallup Strengths Finder. If you're authentic to, and this may sound weird, but authentic to who you really are based on those, because they're pretty accurate. Does that mean any type of personality can be a leader too, right? As long as you're authentic in that.
Absolutely. I think, authenticity from that standpoint is understanding who you are and being comfortable with that, and continuing, go back to the curiosity. How do you continue to grow and develop? But if you're not authentic, people don't trust you. You're not being your true self, and all of a sudden that becomes, a red flag for your relationships. You can't really have deep, strong relationships with other people unless you're authentic with yourself. And that's
determination. It may seem self-explanatory, but there are probably, and I'm sure you've met them in leadership groups, I'm sure you've met people who are great at what they do. They're doers, but they don't have the determination maybe to go to that leadership role. They're happy where they're at. Leaders have that determination to lead.
Yeah, I honestly think everybody is a leader, Travis. I think, you look back at it and you take a young family, for example, and they just have a baby. Who's leading the household? They might not even know it, but that baby's leading the household. Okay.
After 4, absolutely, it's the baby.
So I think everybody is a leader in some capacity. Now, they may not have a leadership title, but I think everybody influences other people around them. And I think that's one of the strongest positions of being a leader is you're influencing others to follow or to take a direction. So that's a generic, but the leadership in a position standpoint, determination. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to do a radio show called Pursuit of Success. And one of the things that I identified out of that group of 150 people was one of their common traits that they all had was an unequivocal discipline around determination to make happen what they thought they needed to make happen.
So should we not get caught up in like titles in the office? I mean, I know some people go after the title. That's their determination. Yeah. They want to get a title. Yeah. Determination to me is in leadership, and I think you brought it up, is just being the best of who you can be every single day.
Exactly. It's like a number. Okay, if I put a number on my head and say I'm going to get to this net worth, what do I do after that? Okay, or this salary, what do I do after that? Same thing with a title. When I get to this title, I've been fulfilled. I've reached the pinnacle. Mm-hmm. And we go back to what we talked about earlier. I think leadership is a continuous journey. And the moment you're done, what do you do next? And so it's like life. It's a great thing about it is it's a continuous journey, ups and downs, and we want to learn from it. What's the gift from each one of those journeys that we have? And that's part of that continuous development.
So my wife will tell you that I lack humility and I'm not humble at all. So talk about being humble in a leadership role. Is that just maybe empathy? Is that being able to work with your employees and more listening skills? Or talk about the humility part of that.
Well, when you asked me about, what were some of the characteristics that I think about in leaders, great leaders, I think of some of these leaders that I have watched over the years, their humility, their ability to meet people where they are, and who you influence. I think humility is about treating everybody with the same degree of respect. So, I don't care whether it's the waitress or the bus driver or the CEO or Warren Buffett. Are they any better than anybody else? And I think part of that humility is I treat people with respect, but I also don't put myself on a pedestal. And so we maybe have accomplished something and, as a business or as a country or as a whatever, in that respect, is it all on me? Well, I'm proud of what we've maybe accomplished, but I got to be humble from the standpoint I didn't do it on my own. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And the last one, you say everybody can be a leader. I would say in something, everybody has a passion. Now, it may not be where they work, but I believe every human is innately passionate about something. It could be sports, could be cars, could be, So the passion piece of leadership. And do you find some people get thrown into leadership stuff they're just not passionate about, and it's hard for them to get over that hump?
Well, I think what you hit the nail on the head there at the end there in terms of it's hard to get over the hump. If you're put in a position of leadership, you're assigned that, right? Okay, you have that, but in that position. But if you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're not bringing your game every day, you're not bringing your enthusiasm and excitement and your passion for what it is, you're quickly going to be called out and you're not being authentic. You're going through the motions because, hey, I got a promotion, I got a title. But that underlying passion of that I really believe in what we're doing and I really want to be the best at it is going to come out and your people aren't going to believe in you and you're not going to be able to lead. So I think for you to be a leader in any company, a true leader in any company, you have to have passion for what you're doing. And if you don't have passion for what you're doing, I think it's up to you to either find it or find something else because you're hurting the greater good by going through the motions.
You're starting to connect with people. Jeremy Montgomery on LinkedIn is watching. And hello, Jeremy. He doesn't have a question, but he does connect with you. He says, yes, if you have influence, you are a leader, regardless of your title. And I think that's starting to resonate people. And I think in today's workplaces, and maybe that's a question, has that changed over your time? You launched this in 2002.
Right.
But heck, I mean, I'll listen to Earl Nightingale and Lead the Field. I'll listen to Robert Schuller and other things. There's different stuff there. But how has the leadership field changed since you launched Leadership Resources and just the way employers interact with their employees?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think leadership from you can define it in a lot of different ways. I always think about it from a servant leadership standpoint. How are we doing that? You can go back to the Bible from that standpoint. So that's been around forever, right? But as what I think has really grown is there is so many ways to grow your leadership today. Social media, the podcasts, the tools that you're bringing to the table today. But there are so many different ways to do it. And I think the younger generation has taught us that it's not just about necessarily formal things that you have to go through. It's about surrounding yourself in an environment that you continue to grow and surrounding yourself with people that move that needle. So I think leadership, I think it's at its infancy from a standpoint of getting smarter and smarter in the amount of knowledge that we can gain. But the thing that'll hold us back, knowledge only goes so far. It's about application. And I think, if you remember in the program, the way we did, we talk a lot about application. I think knowledge is great, but knowledge without application really becomes unproductive. It's there, but I'm not using it.
Is leadership a science? Because I mean, I'm being dead serious here.
No,
Because
I know
if you
you
think
are.
about it, I mean, heck, you have a lot of sports psychologists who focus on staying focused and leadership that way. And you look at all the books, all the seminars, and everybody's looking for that edge. Is leadership and the teaching of leadership a science, or is it just a set rules and applications that you go through?
Oh, no, I think it's a science. I mean, I think you look at all the intelligences that we have: social intelligence, emotional intelligence, positive intelligence, all in moral intelligence. But you can learn and you can grow your brain, and you can really, it's like working out. The more you work it out, the better you get at it. I am not the same leader I was 3 years ago, and I've gained more in the last 3 years than I did in the first 55 years. But it's a matter of constantly figuring out different ways to work your leadership muscles.
So when it comes to leadership resources, putting somebody through a workout, because now you're like the personal trainer, right, or the group trainer. So what does that look like? And I should have put the website up. Can you give your website real quick? Is it leadershipresources.com?
Yeah, no, it's the letter L lrsuccess.com.
Okay.
So it stands for Leadership Resources Success, but lrsuccess.com.
See, I should have got that, and I blew it. I'm sorry.
No, you're humble.
But what does that look like? So when you guys come in, do you do individual coaching? Do you do all team coaching? What if somebody can't afford the whole kit and caboodle? Is there some place you can mix with other teams? What does that all look like?
Yeah, what we do is assess everybody's situation, right? But there are certain things in order for us to be really scalable for our clients and really provide them the best solution. We'll look at group cohorts like you and your executive team did for a leadership development process. We'll look at our Accelerate operating system for strategic. I think that's a form of leadership as well, but it's the strategic direction of the firm. And we'll do individual coaching. And there are people that come to us for individual development programs, but that individual coaching is the way for an individual to get involved. And we're going to bring in our curriculum there as much as we can as well. But we really want to assess that person's need and meet them where they are.
It's interesting because if somebody would say, "Hey, Travis, who are your influencers when it comes to leadership?" I would say Tony Robbins, right? I would say Bob Carlisle, who happens to be my boss, who I think is a fabulous leader. Who I would say like Kirk Ferentz, the Iowa football coach. I know people are going to be mad at me, but I'm an Iowa fan, so I can say that. But I also covered Tom Osborne for a number of years, and I would say Tom Osborne is up there. But there's people. I thought it was interesting because I asked you, who are your influences? Mm-hmm. And the truth is, you didn't go to the gurus. You didn't go to a coach. You didn't go to, Zig Ziglar or something like that. You didn't go there. You went to family. Yep. You went to clients, peers, that next generation. And this one I love the most. And this actually made me just go, wow. You gave me a wow moment, Boyd. And that is the person I am listening to. Those are your leadership influences.
Yep.
Can you go into detail, especially about that person I'm listening to?
Yeah. Well, let's be real. Who's one of the biggest influencers in your office?
Influencers in my office?
Yeah.
Well, I think the biggest influencer in the office is Bob Carlisle, then followed by Tony Fuccinero. Who do
Yeah.
you think is an influencer? After
I,
you went through, who's an
I,
influencer in
I
this
think
office?
I think it's Mary.
Oh,
And here's the reason why. I mean, when I walk
and
in
you're
the
talking about
door,
Mary Carlisle, who works at the front desk.
yeah, and I didn't know she was Bob's sister. Okay. But I will tell you that she influences everybody who comes in that building, because when you walk in, she greets you with a smile. She makes you feel special. She engages you. And I mean, this is a impressive building you all have. But you walk in, you can have a conversation with Mary, and she's phenomenal. But it's that person I'm listening to at that moment. And so many people go through these waves in life, and just, I'm going to walk in, I'm going to say, Mary, which room am I in? And they don't really realize that's a person. And when you sit down and, not necessarily have an hour conversation with Mary, but just have a moment with her, you're going to be influenced by her, from her faith, her passion for Creighton, her passion for the office. You get the culture of MCL from talking to Mary Carlisle.
Greg says everyone is called to lead. When you're called to lead, your impact will be a result of your ability to apply your knowledge and experience. Do you agree with that comment?
Absolutely. As the president of our company, I need to.
Chris says this: facts. Receptionists can make or break a sale anywhere.
Every time, and they can make and break a relationship with a vendor as well. And we're the vendor there. But Mary didn't have to welcome. She could have treated me like, hey, you're just a vendor, you're just coming through. But no, I felt like part of the family. I wanted to come back to see her, right? So can I go back to that family one for just a little bit here?
Absolutely.
I want to give you just a quick story here. You talked about my daughter getting married a couple weeks ago. And we always talk about the matriarchs in our family, but I learned something so deep about my mother-in-law and my mother during this time of the wedding. And, this whole time we're getting ready for the wedding, the one thing that my daughter wanted, was for her 4 grandparents to be there. And God bless, they were able to make it. Well, both
That's
my
awesome.
father and my father-in-law both went through some incredible challenges. But what do they tell you at every wedding? They tell you, for better or for worse, for sickness or in health. Well, these 2 matriarchs of our family, they work so hard, so tirelessly with our fathers to get them healthy to be able to make that wedding. They showed leader. They influenced me. They made me think about what it really means to say in sickness and in health. And I got to see it firsthand. But they also influenced my daughter, who's now 1 week married, and she watched both those individuals that were married for 60 years, how they led their family and how they worked through sickness and health. But that's an influence, right? And it's just the people surrounding you. And I just think that's huge. And then the other piece is the peers, Travis, the clients, the peers. This goes back to that curiosity. If you're not entering a relationship with the desire to make that relationship deeper, you're really wasting time. So find out your peers, your family, your clients, really develop a curious mindset to build a deeper relationship with people.
Can that also be that mentorship part too, right? Your peers. Yeah, I mean that's part of that mentorship piece too. I find fabulous. So what's next for Leadership Resources? What's next for your business to continue to grow? Is there a new piece of? Yeah, you told me you released a white paper today. In the digital world now, what does that all look like? Whether it's e-learning and stuff like that. What's next for Leadership Resources?
I think the big thing is, how do we expand our impact? One of the things we talk about is being so remarkable that clients come to us. And what does that mean? We want every client to have the experience that you had, that comes on and say, wow, these guys are fabulous. What they're doing is they're changing people's lives. And when we do that, it becomes a cultural thing for our brand and our model. We can't force somebody to do this. Leadership development is icing on the cake. Every day you wake up and you're a good person. People look in the mirror. They don't think of themselves as a failure. Most people do not think of that. Well, leadership development is icing on the cake then. How do we take the good and make them great? How do we take the great and make them better? So our job is to help people see that they can have much more out of their life by practicing these quality leadership behaviors, developing these habits. So when we do that, we're going to continue to expand the digital economy, the digital world, the Zoom world like we're on right now. We can reach across the country, and we already are. And so this really did expand our footprint, Travis, to where we can impact other leaders around the country.
And keep in mind, we always have to keep growing, right? Whether personally or if
Oh,
you work
absolutely.
for a company that wants to keep growing. This is an investment, but you cannot grow unless you make an investment. I think everybody needs to understand that, right? I mean, it is an investment.
Well, I've had a coach for 16 years. At some points, I've had 3 coaches. I continue to invest in it, not because I feel like I'm broken, but because I feel like there's so much more to do and so much more to learn. And, the old motto is you're either green and growing or ripe and rotting. And there's no in between. You talk to any good coach, any good leader, they're constantly looking at growth. That doesn't mean 100% growth every year. It just means that you're constantly looking to grow one way or the other.
I want to be respectful of your time. I told you there's going to be a half hour, and we are right at that half hour mark. Quick reminder that I want you to follow MCL Construction on social media. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and of course, go to our website, mclconstruction.com. You can find Boyd on LinkedIn. Just search Boyd Ober. Also go to lrsuccess.com. What's the best way to get a hold? Is the website the best place to get a hold of you?
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Go to the website, lrsuccess.com, and it'll give you an opportunity to sign up for a discovery call or just have a conversation with us. We're here to help people, and we're inspired to do that. So, Travis, I appreciate you and thank you.
No, Boyd, thank you for your time. Best of luck, and I'm sure you and I will hook up very, very soon. Again, if you're watching this on social media, it's going to be on a re-record right here on these social channels. Please share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues. There's lots of good information here on leadership. And of course, when you want to take that next step with leadership coaching, training, make sure to check out Leadership Resources and Boyd Ober and his team. Boyd, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next month on the next Client Conversations, brought to you by MCL Construction. Hold on real quick, Boyd.
Okay.